Good afternoon, everyone. Friends and colleagues, together we can restore democracy in the American dream. My name is Patrick Mosolf. I'm running for the nomination for the Democratic Party for Virginia's 2nd Congressional District to run against Jen Kingless. I'm a former federal employee of the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, which was abolished last year under the Trump administration. My career in development aid in the nonprofit sector, particularly in sectors related to good governance, respect for human rights, rule of law, and electoral processes, prepares me well to serve in Congress to strengthen our democracy and find policies to restore the American dream. I believe that our country faces an unprecedented assault on our very constitutional system, rule of law, civil society, and checks and balances. This has become a series of glaring issues that goes beyond the partisan differences that, in a different era, might be the policy concern that we would be debating with the Republican Party. Since the election of Donald Trump last year and his assumption to office in January, our country has been subject to an avalanche of assaults, day after day, pushing the envelope and overwhelming our capacity to respond. More and more power has been concentrated in the hands of a man who seems far too willing to violate the norms and boundaries that restrained previous presidents. In fact, every week it is seen that our country is falling closer and closer to a dictatorship. I recognize that for many Americans, these threats may not be at the forefront of their attention, and that they are more concerned about issues such as the cost of their home, food, education, and healthcare. However, as you are the party faithful, I trust that you are following the daily course of events and are as concerned as I am about the gradual dismantling of our democratic society. My platform consists of 3 parts. 1, restoring our democratic system and rolling back the assaults that I discussed just now. 2nd, I propose a platform of reconciliation. Once we restore our democracy, we need to reconcile from the pitched fever of conflict that we are currently experiencing and that is leading to an environment of dehumanizing rhetoric, violent attacks, and threats of violence. In my vision, Americans will still have conflicts, of course, but our conflicts will be managed in a civil way. I hope to restore our society to a civil dialogue in which we can peacefully live beside those who disagree with us. The 3rd point in my platform is addressing the hardship that citizens are facing due to the rising cost of living. I seek to improve people's livelihoods and lifestyle by addressing the cost of housing, healthcare, insurance, transportation, food, and utilities. This is not a simple matter, but with a track record of addressing economic issues and policies that affect the cost of living, I am hopeful that progress can be made to return the American lifestyle to one that is comfortable and enjoyable. For more about me, I grew up in Point Pleasant, Ohio, while commuting to school in Cincinnati. A gifted student, I was a National Merit Finalist and attended Northwestern University near Chicago. While at Northwestern, I was influenced by my Aunt Joan, who was a civil rights activist, and I decided to dedicate my life to solving the challenges in our country and the world. As a recent graduate, I was the director of a homeless shelter for 18 people in Cincinnati and was active in a movement of low-income people advocating for their rights and to secure low-income housing. In line with my activism and wanting to experience the extremes of poverty and dysfunction in government, I traveled overseas and eventually became an aid worker. I worked to protect people's political human rights and became involved in monitoring elections in Cambodia and implemented elections in Liberia with the UN mission in Liberia. After advocating for political rights and democratic systems with local organizations, I served as the Democracy and Governance Advisor for USAID in Cambodia. I later promoted rule of law and human rights in Burma, also known as Myanmar, before the military coup. I returned to serve with USAID again in Bangladesh, providing aid to Rohingya refugees and their host communities. I arrived to serve in USAID Lebanon just a few days after the Israel-Gaza war started, and led the local development office in renewable energy, water supply, support for civil society, and social reconciliation. During my career, although I worked in several subject areas, most of my work was related to promoting democracy in authoritarian systems strengthening independent civil society groups' ability to represent citizens, free and fair elections, and managing conflict between different groups in society. In short, democratic systems, good governance, and a democratic society. After having gained all of this experience addressing challenges in difficult contexts like Lebanon or Burma, I believe that running for office is the best way I can serve my country in these extremely trying times. Now I'd just like to go off script for a second. So one of the things I want to talk about today is to emphasize that I myself grew up in a small town. I mentioned Point Pleasant, Ohio, and I've also spent a lot of time in rural areas overseas. My wife is a naturalized US citizen, and she's from a small village, and we actually spent a lot of time there during the pandemic. A lot of my wife's relatives are rice farmers. Her great uncle raises ducks for a living, and also provides supplies to the supply chain for farmers in the area. I really believe that the Democratic Party should be doing more to try to win over counties like Isle of Wight County and the other rural areas in the 2nd District. Not only do I believe we should be doing more, but I believe that the Democratic Party can actually win in rural areas. But I think that means that we need to get out there and we need to relate to people more. We need to talk to people. I just looked up the election results for this district from the 2025 election. It looks like Spanberger lost by about 14%. So that's still a big gap, but you want to close the gap. And I talk to a lot of people. I get out in public, I talk to people every day, and I meet them where they are, and I talk to them where they are, and I talk to them about the issues. And that's what we've really got to do. We've got to engage with people in this area. We've got to talk to them and at least try to bring them around a little bit to understanding better the perspective of the Democratic Party. And that's also related to the second pillar of my platform that I mentioned about reconciliation. Even if we can't get people to vote for the Democrats, at least we're doing the good work of building those bonds again, rebuilding those bonds again in our society, so that at least we can feel some cohesion here in our local communities. I'd also like to talk about why I think I'm actually the best candidate for this. So there's 4 candidates in the race. We have some very strong candidates. But like I said, I decided from a very young age to devote my life to solving problems in the world. We're talking big ticket items, war, poverty, environmental destruction, dictatorship, and until now I've actually done a lot of work on many of those things. The first country I went to and really worked in was Cambodia. I arrived there in 2002. That was only a few years after their civil war ended. Most people know Cambodia is a country that experienced a genocide. So the society there was completely damaged by the genocide, and it was still under an authoritarian rule even though they had elections. I worked to try to make Cambodia a democracy. A lot of my career has been working to try to make Cambodia a democracy. We nearly got there in 2013 when I was working for USAID, but now it's gone backwards again. In 2005, I went to Liberia. That was just after the peace agreement that ended the war in Liberia. Liberia had an unbelievably bad civil war. When I went there, there were still bullet holes in buildings basically everywhere. And I went there again in order to implement elections with the UN mission in Liberia. Later on, I stayed in Liberia to work on humanitarian issues, again, with the UN. Later in my career, I worked in Burma or Myanmar. I don't know, has anyone here ever heard of Aung San Suu Kyi? Aung San Suu Kyi is like a famous democracy icon. Some people consider her to be almost like Gandhi or Martin Luther King. She spent years in jail. She spent years in prison because she advocated for democracy. When I went to work in Burma, that was the one time in their history where her party was actually in control in a kind of uncomfortable alliance with the military. And we were there promoting human rights and rule of law in Burma in that brief interim of about maybe 6 years, where there was a chance for a democratic government actually to take root in Burma or Myanmar. My last position forgot to mention Bangladesh. How many people here have heard of Bangladesh? What's the first thing you think of when you think of Bangladesh?
Family.
Family? Okay. I think a lot of people, when they think about Bangladesh, they think about like humanitarian catastrophes. There were some major famines in Bangladesh. I think years ago, George Harrison did a benefit concert for Bangladesh. So it is really a country that has a lot of challenges, and I work there on refugee issues. Thank you. Thanks. I work there on refugee issues, the refugees from Burma, some of the most dispossessed people in the world. Final position was in Lebanon. Again, I mentioned during the Civil War. Within a few months after arriving in Lebanon, I talked to all my colleagues from the UN, and I came up with a proposal for democratic reform in Lebanon. So, someone that can solve those kind of problems, I truly believe that this country, we're facing an unbelievable level of difficulty right now under this Trump administration, the second Trump administration, but I believe that I am the right person that will be able to address these crises that we're facing. So going back again, above all, I believe that the Democratic Party and the citizens of this country must find a way to limit and stop Trump's assault on our democratic system. And taking back the House of Representatives is one of the best ways to do that. Future generations will ask of us what we did to stop this assault on our country's revered democratic institutions, as well as address deeper crises such as climate change. For my part, I am prepared to represent the Democratic Party and this district for the benefit of all its citizens. I look forward to building relationships with all of you in the coming months, and I welcome you to join my campaign. I'm looking for volunteers as we find solutions for the crisis that we are facing. Together, we can restore democracy and the American dream. Thank you.